This is why people say when you're stating your goals, when you are setting your intentions, that you do it in the present tense. You do it from abundance and you detach from the outcome. This is everything that you want, which is why affirmations for a long time has been the key recommendation that people have offered out there to the world. And it makes a lot of sense. But again, like I said, what if there was a way where rather than treating the effect, how I see affirmations as being, and instead looking at what can actually cause you to automatically, without trying, effortlessly be exuding, emitting this vibration of abundance instead of chasing after it? What if there was a way where you were able to simply have these automatic, goal orientated, and abundant thoughts that you didn't even necessarily have to force right lines rather than having to repeatedly say affirmations again and again and again. Instead of doing that, there was a way where you could automatically have these affirmations that are just within you, this new energetic state. And so the big shift that you can make in doing this new process, which doesn't require you to have to use so much of repetition. And I give you another example of this. It's like a lot of people, when it comes to memory, the main way that they try to memorize things is through a method called rote learning. So it's through like just simply repeating it again and again and again and again and again, and then expecting that after exposure, repetition, that this is how you're going to be able to memorize what it is that you want the quickest. And so, like my sister, for example, she's been able to memorize the entire Quran, which is about 800 pages long, something like that. And when I asked her how she did it, she actually said that, yeah, most of it was just rote learning. So it took her, I think, like 15 years or something like that to memorize the entire thing. But there are some people in the world who can do way more in terms of memory. Why? Because they're not using the same system of how to memorize or the same method. And this is proven where it's like rather than using simply rote learning, you can actually use a method where you're visualizing what it is that you want to remember, and through combining emotional aspects where you feel the memory more, associating it with things that you can link it towards. Um, Doing things like this can actually put it more into your long-term memory quicker instead of just being in your short-term memory. And if you don't believe me, here's a practice that you can actually do right now that will showcase to you how powerful visualization can be with regards to memory. Welcome back to Most Flow, the show where souls grow and hearts glow. And today's episode, as you can see, it's a little bit of a different setup that I've got. Just been playing around a little bit. I actually was watching one of my videos back, and I was like, no, the lighting just doesn't seem quite right. Um, and I know I can do better. So I've just been playing around a little bit. You'll have to give me a little bit of feedback and let me know how does this feel in comparison to some of the previous videos that I've done. And I also like this setup as well, just because, let's say, for example, somebody jumps on Yasmin, Ben, Taha, like any people that I'll be coaching. It's like a different feel now whenever I'm going to be speaking to my laptop that's over here and my camera that's over here. Because I'm talking to you guys, I'm talking into my camera. But if I'm speaking into the laptop as I'm facing the people, then you're gonna get like a different feel to it. And this all follows on as well, like not just from like the camera and filming skills that I've learned over the years, but it's also um, following on from that previous video that I made on authenticity. This setup over here, I don't know why, but it just feels a little bit more authentic compared to like head on speaking directly at the person. Because even when you think about it, it's like how often when you're having a conversation with someone will you just like you know talk at them face to face for the length of period of time that I do. I feel like it wants to be, if I'm going to be speaking with people for that long, like a bit more of a cozy and comfortable feel. So yeah, this is me playing around a little bit here, and it's probably not the final setup ever because it's always kaizening. Um, if you don't know what that word means, it means constant and never-ending improvement. So we're always kaizening the setup. If you take a look at what it was like, my setup from the very beginning of my journey, if you want to go all the way back to then, it was just literally a crappy camera, which was my phone camera. I didn't even have a room. I was sleeping in a room that was given to me by a friend who had a spare place in his uni hall. Um, and I was just like filming my videos with my shaky hand. Um, and I was right next to the wall as well. So, big tip for when you're filming your content, if you want it to look amateur as hell, then pick a background and put your body really close to it as well. That's like one of the easiest ways that you can make it look amateur if that's the style that you're going for. But if you want to get like more of a professional sort of setup, like mine is a little bit more of right now, then easiest thing that you can do to begin with is just make sure that your camera is furthest away from the actual wall at the back. That'll give it some real depth. Um, but yeah, I'm not like a filming uh, teacher, educator. I've just learned a little bit along the way so that I can be constantly improving my craft. Because I think a lot of it is not just about, the way that you will present yourself verbally through your content, but it's also about how you present yourself in terms of the feel and the atmosphere, the ambience. It's about how do people feel like when they're in my space. So yeah, if you're watching this on the YouTube or on the replay in the school, let me know in the comments, how does this make you feel in comparison to what some of my other videos been like when I'm speaking to you like head on versus side by side, a little bit like this. Um, but yeah, the actual topic of today's episode was going to be around how affirmations, as much as people will be throwing this down your throats if you're in the entrepreneurship space, personal growth space, um, spiritual, whatever space that you're in, one of the first things that they'll teach you is this idea of positive thinking and how positive thinking can help you to attract more of what it is that you desire in your life. So I started off, I remember like the very first thing that my sponsor is the best way to describe him. He told me to do when I got into the business that I was in, the online business. He said that before reading any book, I should watch this documentary that was called The Secret. So a lot of you probably have seen the documentary. If you haven't, um, and you're still quite early on in your personal growth journey, I do think that The Secret's a bit of an eye opener in terms of learning a bit more about how the world works and some of the possibilities that exist. But the further you get in to personal growth, and you kind of realize that there's levels to the game. So depending on where you are, different things are going to resonate, will wake you up. But The Secret, I'd say, is like very foundational, which is why if you haven't watched it, I still recommend it. But that was many years ago. Like the first thing that I got introduced to, and there's been a lot of growth since then, a lot that I've learned. And the whole message that's given in the secret is like focus on positive aspects of life instead of the negative, which is what 99% of people will do. Like they'll just literally be in a victim place, believing that life is happening to them. And just like we were talking about yesterday as well, like the world is full of scarcity, there's no real abundance. So, if that's your frame and perspective on life, then your life will reflect your viewpoint. And this is why going from one extreme to the other can be a good idea because it can center you a little bit more. The idea with focusing more on the positive is not that you completely negate the negative, but it's more about coming into a place of being more in balance. So if you're anything like I was before watching that movie, like I was having a lot more negative thoughts within my subconscious, and even consciously, that's what I was focused on, being in this depressed place and just having that as the reflection of my reality. So that's where most of people spend their time, is in that negative space. But then you'll have some people who are like, yeah, I just got to be a little bit more positive, be more positive. And so this is where, like in the movie The Secret, they'll be teaching you things like how to do affirmations, how to say these statements where they are positive thoughts, positive statements. They can be self-affirming, could be goal orientated. Um, but the whole idea with that is that the message was teaching in The Secret that your thoughts create your reality. Now, science does show that what we think about, we become. This is neuroscience, but it's also looking into quantum physics as well, and how we are actually affectors of our own reality, we recognize and realize. Um, but there was actually something that I personally was reflecting on from yesterday's conversation that we had around how, rather than taking a look at just the effects, it's better to look at the cause of things because we have the law of cause and effect. So if you are constantly focusing on like just the effect, then it's always going to feel like so difficult to solve the problem because you're constantly putting fires out. It's like in business, whenever you've got someone who's coming up to you saying like, this is the most urgent problem that we have to solve this, solve this, solve this, and just like people coming at you from everywhere, you're putting out the fires because you don't really know the root cause of why all these problems are occurring. um, so it ends up taking lots of resources, lots of time, lots of stress. And the same thing happens in people's lives as well. Like we, in health, for example, a lot of people will say that, oh, I've got this knee pain, I've got this headache, I've got, trouble with it, like ADHD. And I'm not saying that there's these aren't genuine, symptoms and diseases that people may struggle with. But what I'm saying is that if you take it from the Western philosophy and that approach of how you will uh, try to heal those symptoms, then you're going to take it from a curative aspect, and you're going to fight the fires with painkillers. Whereas the Eastern philosophy and Eastern medicine is less about the surface level symptoms, and it's about going deeper and looking at what's the root cause, taking more of a preventative approach. So if you're willing to take a preventative approach, then it means that you can solve like the one problem, and then from there, like everything else takes care of itself. There's a really good book on health that I recommend reading if you haven't before. It's a book called Never Be Sick Again. And they give a model, which is a visual model, and it shows you how every single disease is simply caused by two main things. It's either a deficiency or it's a toxicity, and that's it. So they've simplified health. And then, of course, it branches from there as well to like six other things. But if you can simply like focus on being able to find the root cause and then get more and more specific based off of that, then you're not having to worry so much and overcomplicate and make it more complex than it needs to be in terms of how you're able to heal. Um, so yeah, what I'm basically saying here is that like after all this reflection, realizing that in certain ways, people will focus too many resources on treating symptoms and the effects as opposed to the causes. I realized that it was the exact same thing when it comes to the way that people will try to change and rewire the way that they think. So, you know, for myself, like if I know that there's a particular goal that I am working towards, then in the past, what it's been like is that I will write down that goal and do it in a way where the statement is an affirmation. I'm saying it in the present tense. Some of you might not know why people do this, but the whole reason why is because um, within the law of vibration, the law of attraction, what we understand is that we attract not necessarily what we want, but more so who we are. And everything that we have in our life is simply a reflection of our identity, which is why I was saying yesterday as well about the be do have formula, where your identity speaks your activity, and your activity is what creates your property. So um, if you're someone who's just like, I don't like my property, you start blaming that aspect. You just simply are unconscious and unaware of the process of creation and seeing that it's your identity that's creating your property. So rather than getting upset about it, you might as well just go to the source, which is your identity, and see how can I make changes here so that my property is also changing. Um, I don't know who said the quote, but it's something like the definition of insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result. Well, if you're looking at your property and you're like, I don't like how much money I have, I don't like how much time, I don't like how much, like what my physical um, aspect of my life is like, then if you just simply focus on the negative of what you don't have, then of course, like nothing will change. And that's being insane. But if you decide that you're not going to be insane, you're going to make a change, then nothing will change until you change. So now you can start changing the identity, right? So yeah, like we know in goal setting, many people when they're just getting started out, they create their goals from a place of lack and a place of scarcity. So you don't want to do that because again, like I said, the results reflect who you are, not what you want. And if what you're asking for is you're saying like in business, I want to be able to make £10,000 in a month, or if you're saying in um, exercise and fitness, like you want to be able to drop 20 pounds or a few kilos, if you simply focus on the lack and what you don't have, then you're going to attract more of that into your life because that's the energy and vibration that you're expressing and that you're putting out into the field. Whereas if you're someone who is more so expressing your abundance and saying in the present tense that, I'm so happy and grateful right now that I am a person that is making £10,000 in a month, a person that's doing the work of a £10,000 per month business owner, and you become that person, you identify as that, then how you'll start to see the results shift will be a lot different to how it would have been when you'd have been operating from this place of scarcity. Now it's like you've detached from the outcome. And just think about it like this as well. It's like your goals and you have a relationship. And have you ever really experienced where chasing someone or something has made them come closer to you. That's rarely ever the case. I mean, you think about it, how guys chase women. Whenever that happens, the woman runs away. When people chase money, if you chase money, it runs away quicker than you can catch it. So this chasing energy and this um, running can take you further than it would be if you were doing nothing. So I'm not here to say like just meditate and everything will come to you. I don't believe in that. But what I'm saying is that if you come from this desperate energy, then you're going to find that what you desire will out of reach because you don't necessarily get, like I said, what you want. You get who you are and what you believe that you deserve. So if you believe that you don't deserve your success and the results that you desire, then even when they do come, you won't be able to hold it. You'll just have it temporarily, have a taste, but then it will disappear. So this is why people say when you're stating your goals, when you are setting your intentions, that you do it in the present tense. You do it from abundance and you detach from the outcome. This is everything that you want, which is why affirmations for a long time has been the key recommendation that people have offered out there to the world. And it makes a lot of sense. But again, like I said, what if there was a way where rather than treating the effect, how I see affirmations as being, and instead looking at what can actually cause you to automatically, without trying, effortlessly be exuding, emitting this vibration of abundance instead of chasing after it? What if there was a way where you were able to simply have these automatic, goal orientated, and abundant thoughts that you didn't even necessarily have to force right lines rather than having to repeatedly say affirmations again and again and again. Instead of doing that, there was a way where you could automatically have these affirmations that are just within you, this new energetic state. And so the big shift that you can make in doing this new process, which doesn't require you to have to use so much of repetition. And I give you another example of this. It's like a lot of people, when it comes to memory, the main way that they try to memorize things is through a method called rote learning. So it's through like just simply repeating it again and again and again and again and again, and then expecting that after exposure, repetition, that this is how you're going to be able to memorize what it is that you want the quickest. And so, like my sister, for example, she's been able to memorize the entire Quran, which is about 800 pages long, something like that. And when I asked her how she did it, she actually said that yeah, most of it was just rote learning. So it took her, I think, like 15 years or something like that to memorize the entire thing. But there are some people in the world who can do way more in terms of memory. Why? Because they're not using the same system of how to memorize or the same method. Um, and this is proven where it's like rather than using simply rote learning, you can actually use a method where you're visualizing what it is that you want to remember, and through combining emotional aspects where you feel the memory more, associating it with things that you can link it towards. Um, Doing things like this can actually put it more into your long-term memory quicker instead of just being in your short-term memory. And if you don't believe me, here's a practice that you can actually do right now that will showcase to you how powerful visualization can be with regards to memory. So Next time that you go shopping, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get a list of 10, 20 things that you're going to buy. And before you go into the shop, rather than, you know, looking at the list when you get into the shop, before you go in, whether in your car or just in your house, we need to look at the actual list. And then I want you to close your eyes and just imagine yourself going into the supermarket. And for everything that you see on the list, I want you to go into the supermarket when you're visualizing this and pick out the actual product that it is that you want to buy and that you want to purchase. And we need to visualize yourself holding it, like feeling the weight of it, moving it up and down, putting it into your basket, and then doing that for every single product, going around the entire store on this walk from one product to the next. Visualize yourself doing the entire thing, how it all feels, and then pay for everything and walk out. Once you've done that visualization exercise, I want you to then scrunch up the piece of paper that is the one that you have as your shopping list, and then just happens when you try to actually buy every single product that it was that you had on the list. And if you've done this visualization exercise, as I've just described, the likelihood is that when you walk into the store, you will literally be able to pick up every single thing that you actually put out on the list. And I remember doing this for the first time and I was like, wow, that was insane. Because usually I couldn't remember one or two things that I had to buy in a supermarket, but this time it was every single thing. Not only did I remember it, but when I walked up to the thing that I wanted to buy, it was like I did it with a lot more flow, a lot more ease. It just felt natural. So this is how it might feel for you too, is that it might feel a lot more flowy, a lot more natural, a lot more easy as you try to memorize everything that I've described there. And so many people tell me that they struggle with memory. And I'm just like, yeah, chances are no one's ever taught you how to really memorize something. You have just relied on rote learning, which is very, very logical. It's like if I just, use my left brain and um, read it out loud as many times as possible, eventually it's going to sink in. But it doesn't work like that. How it works better is when you activate that left brain as well, and then you start using the visualization. Okay, so this is just an example of how you can be going about getting a particular outcome, but doing so with way more ease and flow as opposed to hard effort and work. There's a smarter way of doing things. And it's the same thing with your creation, your affirmations that you have. Like the logical way to do it is just, yeah, say things repeatedly again and again and again. It's very left brain. But really, our reality responds more so not necessarily to our thought, but how we feel, right? So in manifestation, they talk about having a thought, but then a sponsoring thought. What's the thought behind that, which is more like the emotional weight that you've got with it? Which is why if you're saying something like, I'm so happy and grateful right now that I'm making £10,000 a month, but the sponsoring thought is saying, but I don't have that much right now. And I can see the lack and scarcity and you start feeling all these things, then because there's no evidence to support that belief, it's going to be more of giving you the opposite of what it is that you actually truly desire when you're creating. And so what the brain um, really needs to be able to create more effortlessly when you're manifesting is not necessarily just the idea and the intention, but it's the evidence and the emotion. So if you can give more evidence and concrete support to a belief, the likelihood that you'll be able to create what you intend and what you desire is going to skyrocket, which is why an affirmation alone isn't that great, but an affirmation with evidence is much better. Um, but even then, I wouldn't say to just state your affirmation and give a reason. The best thing that you can do is transition from using an affirmation to asking a question. Because our brain has a part of it called, scientifically speaking, we have a part of our brain called the RAS. The RAS is the reticular activating system. Look this up. And so, how the reticular activating system works is that it will delete information that we have in our reality so that we won't be totally overwhelmed with everything that's going on. Because the brain is not processing everything in our environment at all times. It's only processing a fraction of that. And the reason why is because otherwise we would be totally overwhelmed. And so what allows us to do this and to function is this reticular activating system. But what the reticular activating system chooses to include and what to exclude is dependent on how we instruct our subconscious. Because how we consciously instruct the subconscious is going to determine what it is that our reticular activating system will seek in information to give us. So if I ask a question, which is, why is everything happening to me? Why is my life so terrible? Naturally, what's going to happen there is that my subconscious is going to start seeking answers and doing a great job of finding all the reasons as to why it is terrible, my life, because parts of that will exist, and it will find all the reasons for why everything is happening to me, which will put me further into a state of feeling like a victim. So a lot of us don't even realize that we're doing this, asking these questions that are then causing us to have all of this emotion evidence within us that's then creating and reflecting a reality where we're victims or where life is difficult, it's hard. So knowing this, it's like, okay, if it works in the reticular activating system to give us these emotions that are negative and creating a life that we don't want, the exact opposite also works. We can use the reticular activating system and our subconscious mind to our benefit by simply asking a different kind of question. You know, a great question to ask as soon as you wake up is, what if everything went absolutely perfectly well today and I just had the absolute best day of my life? What are all the most beautiful and reasons for why I should be super grateful right now and super excited for my life today? Why am I so blessed and fortunate? Automatically, and will go towards these answers and it will feel effortless in comparison to what is more upstream and forced of trying to say affirmations. Whereas asking questions is downstream. Asking questions makes it effortless and gives you automatic positive thoughts. This is how you really rewire your subconscious. So ask yourself the question, what's the best question that you can really ask yourself? And here's the thing as well, it's like, even in communication, when you think about it in relationships or any time that you're having a conversation, usually asking questions makes conversations better or makes you appear to be a better conversationalist. Asking questions makes you a better thinker, always. And even when you look at the word asking, it actually breaks up to be as king. As king puts you into your real divine authority, where you're able to utilize one of the most powerful aspects of your language. So, this is what really gets those neurons firing together like crazy. So, the question, and you'll notice that I ask questions all the time. I'm doing this not just for you, I'm doing it for me too. But the question that you want to be answering now is, what is actually the best quality question that you can possibly ask yourself or another person? And for me, questions can be asked for different purposes. Questions can be asked to cause questions can be asked to cause transformations. So if what I truly desire to have is to gain the maximum value and cause the biggest transformation, what I know to be the case is that transformation comes from the change that occurs when you step into the unknown, when you go into the unfamiliar, when we start becoming conscious of the unconscious, what we're not aware about. This is where the most potential is for growth. There's no growth that happens in the comfort zone. So if I'm going to ask a question and it takes me into, or another person into, the unknown, the unfamiliar, takes us into the unconscious, this is the best quality question that you can ask. A question that you don't really know the answer to. And I do this all the time for myself or other people. I'm always asking questions that I don't know the answer to, and the other person doesn't know either. But from doing this for such a long time, what I've realized is that my mind is able to go and grab the information to answer the question naturally. And it's either going to look for the answer within me because it's got a memory bank. So we'll go to the things that I've been exposed to and what I've remembered. And by the way, like the subconscious picks up on way more information than we're aware of. So even if you don't consciously remember putting your focus towards trying to remember something, your subconscious may still have it exist within because it picks up on everything. And a great way to illustrate this is that I was watching the movie Focus at the weekend, the one with Will Smith, Margot Robbie. Great movie. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend. Um, and in that movie, there's, I'd say the best scene is when they are doing like this job and heist. Um, but it's basically like they're in a stadium having to get another rich guy to bet against them. Um, and they're just constantly betting against each other, but the guy's losing on purpose. Will Smith is in the scene, so that eventually he'll has like a super bet where they're betting like millions, and it started off as like $100, $200, but they're betting millions, and he ends up winning the bet. And then when he broke it all down in the scene as to like how he did it, it was literally through the whole day they'd been subconsciously priming him, which essentially means giving him subliminal messages that stayed within his subconscious. This is why, if you think to yourself, like, maybe you've not been affected by television as you've been growing up, the media, and your subconscious is fine, you're most likely very wrong. Everything that you'll have consumed and digested will have affected your subconscious from a very young age, right? So, what I'm basically saying here is that um, your um, your subconscious never sleeps. It's always awake. It's always taking everything in. So when you are doing your asking of questions and um, you're going to a place which may feel unfamiliar, you can then start tapping into your subconscious, the unconscious part of you, that you're not consciously aware about it, but the answer may reside there. And then beyond that, what I believe to happen is that if you ask a question that you don't know the answer to, you've never been exposed to before, this is simply a reason to now start connecting to a higher dimension, like really raising and elevating your consciousness to a different level. So a lot of people, when they don't get an answer like straight away like this, they're like, "Ah, I give up. Don't know the answer." And really, what they're doing there is they're answering a different question, which is, you know, why don't I know what the answer is to this question? Why is this so hard? Um, why is he asking me this question? They start directing their focus something else. Why? Because they don't necessarily value the truth or value this experience of transformation that can occur when you enter into the unknown through a question that challenges you. So every day, what you want to be doing is you want to be asking yourself questions that you don't know the answer to. If you just do what most people do and expect a different result, that's insanity. We've already established that. And what most people do is they ask themselves daily the same questions that are giving themselves the same answers. If you're stuck in procrastination, a bad question is, oh, I don't know why. Why am I so stuck? Why am I not doing anything? You're literally just building up this evidence to support that belief that you're stuck. The better question to ask here is, why am I so good at staying consistent and disciplined and delighting in my consistency? Why is it a benefit and service to my highest values to be constantly taking massive action? These are questions that you might not know the answer to, but your subconscious is going to search for it. And then, even if that doesn't work, it's like, yeah, you start using an excuse to start entering higher dimensions. See, people will rush towards like looking externally for information. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to do that. But I personally believe that, we're living in a society and world right now where people are very addicted to external information, which is causing them to no longer utilize their muscles in their brain to actually think. So the more that you will give up quickly and then give in to just taking information from AI or Google, YouTube, what's going to happen is that your thinking muscle is going to diminish massively. And even when you look at like the actual global intelligence rate over the last 100 years or so, it's literally a line that goes down like this. People are getting stupider and stupider and stupider like every single year in terms of their ability to use their intellect. Why is this? Because people are getting lazier when it comes to getting answers to certain questions. Now, I'm not saying never use Google, never use YouTube, never use AI. I think people don't use these things enough. But what I'm also saying is that you probably want to have a certain period of the day where you just give yourself space to ask really good quality questions that you don't know the answer to, that are going to elevate your consciousness, that are going to put you into a high vibration, that are going to make you somebody who's more consistent, more disciplined, taking more action. And it's going to help you to have these automatic grateful thoughts or positive thoughts that can allow you to now shape your reality as opposed to going uphill, forcing it with these affirmations, allowing your reticular activating system to do what it does. This is why it's so cool to learn more about how your own mind works, how neuroscience works, because people, most people don't really look into this kind of stuff. It just gives you this razor's edge because You're no longer having to try as hard as everyone else. You're just getting things done. So yeah, this has been a an interesting one for me personally as well. Once I started doing this major shift, like I felt it right away, especially when I started to ask myself these really intentional questions that were putting myself into a direction of like getting closer towards my goals. It was an instant feeling, and you'll get what I mean too. It won't feel like the affirmations, which is always like separation, attachment, desperation. It won't feel like that. It'll feel completely different. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this one, and I'll be looking forward to hearing some of your feedback, your comments, and seeing y'all tomorrow or whenever I post again um, for the next one. Take care, peace and love. We'll see you next time.